Good afternoon and welcome to Conversations Aren't Showing Up for Kids. I don't even know the name of my own show. Congratulations. So Conversations Aren't Showing Up for Kids. This is what we get together every week and we talk about topics and meet people that may be interesting to the families of children and youth with special healthcare needs in the Southern region. And I am so excited because not only do I get to talk to a person who is pretty dang smart. She's also pretty cool. Worked with Karla on a couple of different projects. And so I'm going to slaughter her last name. So let's see how we do today. Karla Ausderau.
That's very good, Tim. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. And she runs the Ausderau Lab, at which I'm just going to go Karla Lab because now I'm just going to, fumble for the rest of the time, at the University of Wisconsin Waisman Center. So welcome, Karla. Glad you're here today.
Thank you. I'm glad that I could be here.
And I know you have a lot of letters after your name. Is it okay that I call you Karla?
Of course. I prefer it.
Fantastic. So first off, tell us what sort of research are you doing? What you up to?
My research really focuses on the health and well-being of children with neurodevelopmental disabilities. And I'm also interested in their families and their caregiving communities. And as I have been working over time, I've realized that children grow up. So my research has continued to expand with that. So I do work with children, but also work with adults with intellectual disabilities as well, and thinking again about their caregiving communities and how that relates to their overall health and well-being.
Wow, that's a huge topic, and it's so important because none of us grow up in a vacuum. We all have people around us. Some of them are more supportive than others.
Mm-hmm.
But we all have people around us. What got you interested in doing this sort of research?
So my background is in occupational therapy, and I love being an occupational therapist. And when I was practicing as an OT, I started toying with the idea of going back to get more education. Particularly motivated by the fact that as a clinician, we are always trying to do best practice with the children and families we work with, and that involves evidence-based practices. And in the field of occupational therapy, we still have a number of interventions and treatments that are building evidence behind them. And I wanted to be part of that process. And so I decided to go back and pursue future education. So that I could start being part of a group that would build evidence to support high-level quality interventions that not only impact an individual, but the community around them, as well as so that I could be a part of educating occupational therapists to treat in an evidence-based practice way, and thinking about more than the individual, but rather the community and family they're situated in.
So what is it about this research that, really keeps you going? I could tell you're passionate about the community, so I imagine that's part of it too. But have you personally, do you do it because it's fun, because you just like to make a difference, all of the above? What keeps you doing the lab work?
That is a great question. Sometimes I wonder, but most of the time.
Well, I know it's, I know a little tiny bit about research, and I know that there is a lot involved in just getting a project started, that it's more than just, actually talking to people and meeting people and interviewing. There's a lot that goes into research. So I'm just impressed when somebody continues to do it.
Well, I think the first is I'm committed to my research agenda, right? I'm committed to thinking about how can we improve the health and well-being of children who eventually grow into adults with neurodevelopmental disabilities. They're a community that has been marginalized. They haven't had equal access to healthcare. They haven't had equal access to participation in the community. And we need to work together to be more inclusive in our research practices, as well as in our interventions to support that. So that's definitely number one. And I think number two, I like to be challenged. I like to learn every day. And I think that research is definitely an opportunity that pushes you to continually be molding and changing as your project work evolves and as you learn new things. So.
Well, and this is now fair warning. We're going to go a little bit off script because now I'm just really interested. Before I was a little interested, now I'm really, really interested. So in the research that you have been doing, is there one time or one study, one research that you went into and you came out and you're just like, yes, like that was super meaningful? Has that, I hope it's happened. If not, could you talk about the thing that's closest to that then?
So I have two examples that I
Great.
think, and like the kind of the best moments for me is like, this is why we do this, right? So the first is that I think this number is still accurate, but on average, it takes at least 17 years, research says, to develop, test, and implement a new intervention in the community in an effective way. And that is,
Hold it, 17 years?
and that is a ridiculously long time, right? And so, first of all, we need to be making that time shorter. So in our research lab, we try and have opportunities to be connecting our research to the community earlier than that, right? But one research project that I know that you're familiar with is our parent or caregiver mediated feeding intervention for children with autism and their families. And that is a feeding intervention that takes place in the home, or now with COVID by telehealth, to support children with autism between the ages of 2 and 7 that have significant feeding challenges. And we approach it from working with the family within the context of family routines and meal times, and working with parents to mediate and support the intervention. And our thought is that nobody knows their kids better than their parents. And I can work with somebody once a week, but that parent is feeding that child 7 days a week, probably 5 times a day, 365 days a year. So if we can work together to think about interventions that will support change in a slow but steady manner over time, we're all going to reach our goals faster and better. So that's a really important study for me. And I think that when we did our first pilot study, and that was actually in the home, and we had 20 families enrolled about that completed the study, and 100% of them met their goals at some level. And we were shocked. And so we went back to look at, and I think that part of our primary outcome measure was a goal attainment scaling. So parents collaborated and set goals with us as to what their kids could do at the end of this intervention. And I think that so many of these families had worked so hard and so long on these behaviors and hadn't had a lot of movement that we probably set our goals too low. But, you know, for some families, they're like, I just don't want my kid to get worse in the next 6 months. So when we first got that set of looking at the effectiveness, just based on their goal attainment scaling over that 6 months, it was like, oh my gosh, here we are developing hopefully a really effective intervention, right? It was a pilot, so we all need to be very cautious. But also at the same time, we were helping 20 families in Wisconsin with young children with autism meet their family goals. So that was like win-win for me.
That is huge. I mean, that is fantastic. What do you think accounts for? And I know you can't, say for sure scientifically, but I mean, I know there's a lot of studies that don't get near that effect. What do you think made the difference with this one? Why was it so effective, even as a pilot?
So I think it was effective, because we were doing intervention within a family's home environment. And so then we could tailor the intervention to meet their family needs. B, I think we had families that were really invested and motivated because they sought us out, right? We advertised and recruited, but then they came to us saying, hey, we want to be involved in a study where we are the primary interventionists and working with you to meet our child's needs. So I think we had a great, ready and willing audience. And I think we collaborated as a team. We really tried to work within the family routines and within the family goals and culture. So that's what I think.
I love that it happened so quickly and that it was so effective. I mean, you know me, if it makes a difference in families' lives, then I'm all for it.
Right.
You said you had a second one that also was meaningful?
Yeah, so the second one I think has been our work with adults with intellectual disability in the state of Wisconsin. And we have a really strong line of research that thinks about how can we do better as researchers to build capacity so adults with intellectual disabilities can have more opportunities to be research participants, but also engage as part of the research team. And so the highlight of that work for me has really been how some of our co-researchers, adults with intellectual disabilities, have been able to help lead us to our next research questions and our next grants. And to me, that means that we are really thinking about outcomes that matter, so that when we do the research, hopefully when we find things, it'll actually be implemented in the community, right? If they're the appropriate outcome.
And hopefully not 17 years later.
Right. And also thinking about questions that are relevant, right? Because we as researchers, just because we think something is important doesn't mean it's relevant, unfortunately.
So based on just looking back a little bit at the history, can you talk at all about why you think it's so important to engage people with developmental disabilities as co-researchers? I mean, this is relatively new, if I'm not mistaken, as this isn't the way that research has always been done.
Exactly. And I mean, in our lab, we consider stakeholder engagement, is what we call it, as being a foundation of all our lab work. So even in the development of our feeding intervention that we just discussed, we had and during the pilot process, we had focus groups of parents of kids with autism who gave us feedback on the intervention and helped us design it from the beginning. So again, that's stakeholder engagement. And then after they exited, we asked them to critically review our intervention process, right? So that we could make it better next time. I mean, and that's the only way we improve. And so, yes, I do think it's new to include adults with intellectual disability, because I think people assume that they lack capacity to participate, and that's just simply not true. They maybe need different accommodations to participate. And maybe we need to think about how to access the strengths and the rich experience that they have to give to the research experience or research process. And so that's why I think people think it's too hard, but it's not. And so it's been a really big part. So we now have a group of I don't know, many individuals with intellectual disability that cover about 7 states around the country that help us participate in our different research activities, depending upon what the question is and where the project is funded. And that really evolved over time. So our very first project we did have co-researchers was a multi-site project with Special Olympics that thought about the effectiveness of their healthy community programs that they were implementing. And through that process, we had co-researchers, adults with intellectual disability, help doing the interviews, so that peers were interviewing each other. And it was so beneficial, because if I sat down and interviewed somebody, maybe I have some training in qualitative interviewing, but I don't have the experience of being an adult with an intellectual disability, and I don't have the experience of being part of healthy communities, and I don't happen to being part of Special Olympics. So it really allowed a better exchange and share of information to enrich the project. And so from there on, we just decided that this is something we need to do. And I think once people learn the benefit of it, people are open to it. So we're currently working with our IRB here on campus to think about how can we negotiate the barriers for researchers to be including with people with ID into their research studies. I mean, a great example of that is COVID-19, right? We know that people with intellectual disabilities have had greater impact of the disease, not only on their health, but on their ability to participate in the community, right? But they weren't a part of any of the vaccine studies.
Right.
Right. And part of it is because people don't know how to do that. And so we're working with our IRB on campus, and then we're also on our IRB on campus to think about, well, what can we do at an institutional level to help researchers be better equipped to be more inclusive in their recruitment processes.
Okay, Karla, you now slipped into a little bit of research talk. Could you explain a little bit what an IRB is?
Sure. So IRB is the governing board on campus, at any campus, that helps us determine how to safely execute research. So they let us know they're there to protect the people who are participating in your research processes, to making sure that we as researchers are doing things correctly and they are not going to harm the people who are participating.
And so they're overseeing number of different research studies. And so they probably use a lot of, please say it this way, do it this way, almost a template. And what I'm hearing you saying is, well, that template isn't working for people with intellectual development disabilities. How can we make it work for everybody?
Exactly. And we're trying to take a universal design approach, because if anybody has participated in a research study, you know that consent form, because everybody, in order to participate, you have to sign a consent form. And it's really difficult to understand for everybody. So if we can think about taking a universal design, meaning that we're going to make it accessible, but we want to make it more accessible for everybody, then the work we're doing won't only support people with intellectual disabilities, but a lot of people in Wisconsin that can better participate in research and be informed about the research process.
Well, and I'm thinking that not everybody needs to have a college level reading ability. That's not what gets us by in life. That's not the most important thing for a lot of people. And so making, again, it's about access.
Right.
Access to being able to participate in research that then is reflective of what my needs are and how to make my life better. Oh, that's really cool. Now you mentioned Special Olympics. What else do you like to do outside of the lab?
Well, I do like to work with Special Olympics, and we do attend some of their events and volunteer, which is always fantastic, but has been a little bit more restricted during COVID-19. However, they are coming back online strong and better than ever. Outside of the lab, I like to spend time with my family. So I have a 16-year-old son, Jackson, who keeps me on my toes and is very active. And so I enjoy being a part of his activities. And then my husband, Todd, Jackson, and I love to travel. So we really love to travel.
What's the favorite place you've traveled to?
Our favorite place that we have traveled, I would say, is South Africa.
Oh my gosh.
In Cape Town. And that was just amazing. It was so gorgeous, and a culture that we'd never experienced before, that I think really was it was a wonderful vacation, but also an amazing learning opportunity as well.
Wow. And do you have a worst place that you've ever vacationed? Worst place that you've traveled to? Some place that you're like, okay, it sounded fun, but please don't go there.
I feel like that's a dangerous question, Tim.
I know it is.
I'm not going to answer that.
Oh, darn it all. No, that's fine, because I'm sure that you would do the research and make sure that you're going to fun places. So I would be surprised if any of the vacations went a little bit sideways.
Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. Anything else that you do outside of that, or hobbies that you'd like people to know about?
So I don't have a lot of hobbies. I'd say my hobby outside of my son and my husband would be my family. So we do the best we can to get up, and my family lives in Wisconsin, and they live in Northwest Wisconsin in a beautiful part of the state that has lots of wooded area, and it's very relaxing and it feels very different than where we are here in Madison. So any chance we can get to spend holidays or other times, we head north.
And that's one of my favorite Christmases when my kids were younger, was when we went up to little town of Webster, Wisconsin, up in the north, and cut down the Christmas tree and dragged it back through the woods, and it was just a really special time. So that is gorgeous up there. I can see why you would love it.
The winter holidays are by far my favorite to come and spend time, because it seems like everybody kind of takes a little break around then. So it's a very nice time to spend with family.
Well, I'm going to give the chance for people who may want to ask questions. You can go ahead and put your questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute in just a moment. But in reading over your bio and reading everything that you do, I keep coming across this word, kinesiology, which in my mind, you're an occupational therapist, because that's how I first got to know you. And I'm like, I know you're more than just an OT, occupational therapist, but what's this kinesiology thing? What is that?
Kind of a funny question. And Brittany Travers and I were actually talking about that this morning. So the definition of, you can think about the definition of kinesiology is basically the study of human movement and how it benefits health and well-being. And that's just traditional kinesiology. However, kinesiology departments around the country tend to be very heterogeneous and incorporate lots of different things that maybe involve health, well-being, and movement. And so I think as an OT program, we're situated within kinesiology, and And sometimes it's a fantastic match and aligns with the original definition. And sometimes it's a little bit more of a stretch for some of the work that we do. But I think if we think about health and well-being and meaningful activity, then it does align quite well.
Okay, well, thanks. That's just one of those big words that, it's like, I'm sorry, but my Greek background, which is highly limited, didn't solve what it meant. So thank you so much for that. Any questions from anybody who have joined us online? Trying not to get too, let's not embarrass her, but anything in the chat, you feel free to put your questions in there. Feel free to unmute and we will be able to see you that way.
Okay, Ed has a question.
Karla, I don't know if this relates at all, but the one thing that sticks in my mind is when you're talking about working with the kids was your experience in Boscobel with the emergency room.
See, there you go, Tim. So that's a great, so actually I'm going to use that prompt as a way to talk a little bit about some of our community engaged work. And that Tim has been a really important part of, actually. So this goes back to the statement that I said earlier around it takes so long for research to impact community. And as many of you may know, that the University of Wisconsin-Madison is really built on this idea of the Wisconsin idea, that we at the university need to be unsiloed within the university, as well as giving back to our community, our state, and our nation, and sharing what we're finding and the wealth of resources we have at the university level. And so our Ausderau Research Lab really works hard to try and participate in community engaged projects that relate to our research agenda as often as possible. And Tim is one of those individuals who is constantly connecting me with people that may have interesting ideas or maybe could help us work with our students. So Tim connected Rose Cutting and I, who is a parent of a child with autism and the director of a nonprofit organization to support families with children with autism called Aiming for Acceptance. And if I'm getting any of those details wrong, Tim, let me know.
You are all over it, Karla. Perfect.
Rose, as a parent and as the director of this organization, had really come up with a need in our rural communities for accessing healthcare in the emergency department, and that there's often so many barriers for autistic children and their families to get good care, not because we don't have good physicians, but because some of their needs may present a little differently, and they may have a stronger reaction to things like the fluorescent lights or the fast-paced movement or the noise. And so we worked with Rose and her organization and the Boscobel Community Hospital and Emergency Department to develop a toolkit to think about ways that we could facilitate better access and care, with the long-term outcomes being, if we can have better access for children with autism, hopefully they have spent less time in the ERs, fewer restraints, fewer drugs. Everybody's happier to get through that process. So we developed a toolkit that contains pieces of education to support people in the hospital understanding more some of the needs that they might be seeing and might be misinterpreted. We created ways to think about actually modifying in the environment. And some are very simple, like putting a cover over IV poles so the flashing lights, minimizing the people that are coming in to clean the room, right? So the trash cans or unfamiliar people are coming in, as well as thinking about what kind of tools and gadgets might we be able to have. So when a family comes in and checks in, they may have forgotten to bring all their stuff, right? So you might have headphones at the check-in desk that we'll say, we have sensory tools. Here are some things you can use to make this experience a little smoother for you and your family. So headphones or fidgets or other things that might be calming for a child with autism. And so we created that kit, and Tim, you will be happy to know that Rose and our team are ready to submit that for publication. And then we'll include the kit as part of the publication so it can be easy accessible. And so the work started in Boscobel, and we've continued to work with some other rural hospital communities in Wisconsin, and then hopefully it'll just be freely available so people can use as needed. And Rose, being the go-getter she is, has a whole way that she thinks we can better disseminate, which is amazing. And again, this goes back to why do we do stakeholder engagement, is that that project would not have been possible without you connecting us to him, and then without Rose's input.
Rose.
And then as we're writing up a publication, which is really, for better or worse, how we as academics measure our success in many ways, right? We try and include our stakeholders as co-authors on those projects. So Rose is actually an author on that publication because she had very meaningful contributions. And then last week, when we're reviewing the final version, we met with her to review it and get her feedback. And she had great ideas for revision before we turn it in that we just wouldn't have thought of because she's looking at it from a different lens.
Yeah, bringing that real life, that lived experience into the laboratory, into the emergency room, into those professional encounters is so often we can look at it from the profession, as our society is pretty much a top down. And so we bring our academics and we bring the professional, and then we try to meet the family. But what if we were together with that partnership, and that we started here instead of trying this, that we were doing this?
Right.
And what a different outcome that could be.
Yep. And recognizing different people's strengths in those relationships.
That is such a great story. And I had no idea you're close to publication. I'm so happy for you guys.
It should be submitted this Friday or the next week.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, I'm in touch with Rose, of course, our number of different projects. So I'll see if I can piggyback on meeting more of her rural ER folks now that we're back to traveling.
Yeah. I mean, Rose was very helpful.
Excellent. Any other questions? Comments? You are very free to say how proud you are of Karla if you would like. Whatever you would like. Oh, I know that we have some close people that are joining us today, and I really do appreciate that.
Yes, we are very proud of Karla. Always happy to hear what she's doing. Always busy.
Yes. Well, thank you. And so thank you all for being here today. If research is sort of your bag, is we will be talking to Brittany Travers on our next research spotlight, which will be April 13th. This will be recorded. The recording will be posted through our conversations on Showing Up for Kids page on children and youth with special health care needs at the Waisman Center. So I will make sure that Karla gets all that information and she can disseminate it as she would like to, but we will get that posted. So thank you all so much for being here this morning. Karla, thank you so much for everything that you're doing and for being the first research spotlight that we have. Way to go.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everybody.